Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
This episode is brought to you by my all-new Super Learner Academy, the home not only of the all-new Become a Super Learner 2.0, but also of my exclusive masterclasses and audiobooks, digital books, and tons of exclusive content only available to members of my masterclasses or my masterclass bundle, where you can purchase multiple courses and save a ton on getting all of that great content. So to check it out and to see all this amazing new content that we've recorded exclusively for Super Learner Academy, visit becomeasuperlearner.com and use the coupon code PODCAST to save. Greetings, super friends, and welcome to today's show. In this episode, we are joined by the founder and spokesperson of a company called Athletic Greens. It's an all-in-one supplement that industry experts like Tim Ferriss swear by as their, quote, nutritional insurance policy. Now, in addition to that, our guest today is a food blogger and a nutrition expert who shares his wisdom with people all over the world. He's a digital nomad like myself, really an inspiring entrepreneur and someone that I just had so much in common with. You can really tell that we hit it off during the episode. So my goal for this episode was really to learn more about the product Athletic Greens, which I've tried and really often makes me feel so much better and so much healthier when I take it. So I wanted to understand what's in the product, understand a little bit more about supplementation, and then also hear my guests' really truly fascinating story of entrepreneurship, health, sickness, recovery, and so on. So we covered a ton of ground in this episode. We really went wide with it. We discussed supplementation, superfoods, nutritional disorders, learning, depression, entrepreneurship, elimination diet, biome testing. I mean, you name it. If it's related to health or entrepreneurship, we talked about it and we covered it. We also even covered the incredible story of how today's guest became one of the closest people in the world to one of my personal idols, Tim Ferriss. So stick through to the end because this episode delivers a ton of actionable and really useful nutritional and entrepreneurial advice. So without any further ado, I want to present to you my new super friend, Chris the Kiwi Ashenden. Mr. Chris the Kiwi, welcome to the show, my friend. I'm super excited we finally managed to catch one another. I know we both have busy and interesting calendar arrangements.
Jonathan, mate, great to be here. Thank you very much for the invite. And yes, you do, good sir, have a very interesting calendar arrangement. I like it.
So, Chris, you were telling me before we hopped on the recording that you're experimenting with some very interesting probiotic stuff and that you might have to duck out for a second. Tell me a bit about that. I just got to go in right there.
Yes. Well, mate, since I've just started chatting to you, it's naturally the first course of discussion should be how's your digestive system. I'm currently experimenting with some really strong probiotic and some new formulas mixed up together in a pretty evil concoction just to see how my body goes. And it's been very interesting so far. So most days I feel a lot better than I did the previous day. And then every now and again, I have maybe 5 minutes notice to make it to the bathroom, maybe 30 seconds. So that's why I said, if I suddenly just say, mate, I got to go, don't worry, I'll come back on a little bit. But apologies if that's too much information.
No, that's fine. I love it. What's the reasoning behind that? Are you dealing with some health issues or just curiosity, improved energy? What kind of prompted it?
Well, mate, I always experiment, and I think the gut biome is that next big frontier. And in this instance, largely, my diet's very spot on, but largely due to prolonged periods of insufficient sleep. And even though us guys hate to use the word stress, too much stress or not enough recovery in response to just sort of like a prolonged, very typical for an entrepreneur, like sort of chronically elevated cortisol level. And it's very, very common. And that actually leads in itself to a whole host of health problems, one of which can be a bit of gut dysbiosis. So I'm enjoying that. And as part of the process, I figured, well, if I'm going to kind of aggressively get after this, then I'll be very aggressive indeed. So I've got a whole bunch of goodies going on.
I love it. Chris, I bet you our audience is wondering who is this guy and why is he experimenting on his gut microbiome. So tell us a little bit about your background, high stress entrepreneurial background, how it is you came to be where you are today, experimenting with having to run to the restroom. Tell me all about it.
Sure, mate. And I saw your bio as well. You have a very interesting bio, Jonathan. So I appreciate having him on the show. Basically, I am a guy who has been entrepreneurial my whole life. I ended up studying for a Bachelor of Science in Sports and Exercise Science at the University of Auckland. I had my first startup start and fail when I was 21 and felt sorry for myself for a few years before getting back into business, but not in the health and fitness sphere, which is something I ended up regretting. I always kept so I'm a certified nutritionist, although that's long lapsed, but I've always kept my foot in the pie in terms of being a trainer and coaching both for athletic performance, for aesthetics, typically with ladies, and also nutrition for fat loss and health. And I've always kept my foot in the door with that. And so when I had the opportunity to sort of kick off a new, everyone loves that word pivot, I guess a career pivot towards my next business venture, I was very much in favor of doing it in the health and fitness space. And about the same time, I had been eating sort of in that 90-10 principle, which is, as long as you do 90% right, and the 10% doesn't really matter. And it turns out that's actually very incorrect for a significant proportion of the population. So I got sick, really sick, and ended up looking for a solution, which led me to a very expensive clinic in the US and a huge amount of money in blood tests, saliva tests, urine tests, like fecal tests, like the non-stop. And they found a whole host of things wrong with me. And it challenged a lot of my assumptions about what I thought had been correct eating, about how our bodies assimilate nutrients, about health and wellness in general, because I had been a pretty good rugby player. I'd been a good athlete, and I kind of looked the part, even though I had sort of dark eyes and I just didn't really feel amazing, and I kept getting sick all the time. So before I went in the clinic, I sort of looked the business, but hadn't always felt the business. And after the experience in that clinic, they put me on a customized my biochemistry $100 a day supplement regime that was 5 or 6, depending on the day, different individual sealed plastic baggies full of multicolored horse pills. And basically, man, it pushed me heavily into a re-education process about nutrition. I ended up becoming a pretty strong fan and advocate of a paleo template, at least to start from in terms of eating. And I went looking for a whole food source version of getting all the horse pills. And the evolution of that, man, was that I paid a lot of people a lot of money and formulated a product that sort of met my needs and decided to roll with that as my next business venture. And I had a whole bunch of guinea pigs try that product. One of them was quite famous. It's called Timothy Ferris, who loved it and became sort of frequent daily users. And it took me a long time as an entrepreneur to launch that business, and to the point that actually I hit some extreme financial difficulties. I ended up parting ways with my original largest financial backer, who was frustrated with me. And it took a lot of learning to go from being a guy who could sell very well face-to-face to trying to figure out how to persuade someone to buy what ultimately is probably the lowest margin dietary supplement on the planet, but still a premium price product. And anyway, we figured it out, man. We're sort of the number one SKU in the sort of green drink space, and that product sort of evolved into a business called Athletic Greens. And I've been operating as the CEO and spokesperson for that business sort of full-time since 2009, 2010.
Incredible. So I have a lot of questions to bounce off of that. The first is, what was in the bag of horse pills and why did you need, did they identify what was wrong with your diet before and why you needed the bag of horse pills to kind of get right? Yes.
Well, what's the right way of articulating this? If you imagine in a tire tube and you are sitting inside an inflated inner tire tube and you're cruising down, the pool, you're inside the tube, but you're not actually inside the tube. You kind of get what I mean. You're sitting inside a closed ring of material, but you actually haven't crossed the barrier into the air that is that inner tube. And unfortunately, many people eat things and put something in their mouths and think, I've eaten this good thing, or I've eaten this thing that I think is good for me. Frequently, it's not a good thing. And therefore, it's going to go into my system and everything's going to be hunky-dory. And frequently, it does not either pass correctly from the digestive tract into our bloodstream, or it passes into the bloodstream but is not assimilated correctly by the cell. And that could be from any one of a number of problems, but we could go right on the rabbit hole with that. But inherently, man, a lot of people are not getting enough nutrition to the cell. And that could be because they have gut dysbiosis. Their gut could be torn up and in disarray, even though they don't know or feel anything, at least from sort of in terms of how they experience life. And it could just be they don't get enough of the nutrients in their mouth to even get there in the first place. So what this particular clinic had done is all the testing I'd done, they'd mapped all the inherent vitamins and minerals, neurotransmitters, and other bits and pieces that my body was extremely low in, either as a symptom of not absorbing well that nutrient or as a symptom of sort of what's happening in my body as a result of being in this beaten up phase of life. And I definitely felt better over a period of time. But, I mean, it was a lot of horse pills. And I was just like, there's something really wrong with this because I'm just playing fluorescent yellow the whole time. And I think sort of the biggest evolution in terms of how people are thinking about nutrition as it relates to supplementation over the last 10 years, and it's, has really been this change from synthetic isolates to whole food sourced nutrition. And we haven't beaten nature yet or even come close when it comes to matching the goodness that is inside food from some synthetic fabrication plant where they're just putting a couple of chemicals together and cooking them.
Absolutely. So here's my question, right? You come into the medical establishment and you're this guy, you look good, you feel crappy. They give you this bag of horse pills. I love how you describe that. And that's point A. Point B is you have this whole food supplement, which, as you said, is one of the most cost-effective supplements out there on the market, which does pretty much the same thing for significantly lower cost. There's a lot of learning between point A and point B, and a lot of research, a lot of understanding. So me, as someone who's interested in accelerated learning, says not, wow, what an amazing businessman, but rather, how incredible is it that you've become an authority on health and nutrition? Tell me how you went from point A to point B, and how is it that you approach learning to where you could become a respected authority among respected authorities?
Okay, well, it's a multifaceted question, a good question. I think I thought I knew quite a lot when I turned up to that clinic sick and got asked, do you eat vegetables? And I said, yeah, why? And they said, you have some of your vitamins and minerals are in like the 12th percentile. And I was like, okay, that's random because I eat 6 to 10 cups a day of vegetables. And they said, do you eat meat and protein enough at all? And I said, yes, heaps, like a cow a day. Like, why? And they said, well, you have amino acids way in this lower percentile as well. And that really challenged a lot of my thinking, man. And I spent maybe 15 to 20 hours a week reading for 3 years to get that base knowledge up. And what I realized after reading pretty quickly is that probably the fastest way to jump a huge leap in terms of the assumed knowledge is go to the people who've been preaching whole food source nutrition first and pay them to help you finalize your formula. So that's exactly what I did, man. I had 2 naturopaths who'd been very, very experienced guys. I can't use their names, unfortunately, because of a deal they subsequently signed with another company. But very experienced guys, a medical researcher, a couple of PhDs, and a doctor who really specialized in sort of functional medicine. And they gave me their 2 cents, and then I would listen to the 2 cents and go and read. And it led to, sort of the formation of, a conglomeration of a bunch of different products into one. I like to think it's a shotgun approach, right? We haven't done your bloods. We're not going to put therapeutic levels of a lot of those herbal extracts into an ingredient, into a formula designed for someone to take every day, because that should be done under medical supervision. But we'll put them in there in adequate dosages for daily dose. And inherently, and I can still say this very proudly, there is not a formula in the world right now that I would recommend that does as good a job at that shotgun, most likely to fit all as a one a day than what we currently do. So at least for now, typically with the barriers as it relates to margins, because we operate on much lower margins than everyone else in the supplement world, we get away with that only because of the volume of subscription customers that we've built up over the years. There's a barrier there. So I became an expert through necessity. I hired experts vastly more experienced and smarter than myself, asked them to present their case. I then looked at their summary and checked it. And if you get two naturopaths, they can be a little bit quacky. These guys weren't. Against a medical researcher, you got one crowd who say, we've seen the science and we've seen it work with our clients. And the other crowd that say, I don't care unless it's been really proven multiple times with double-blind studies.
Right.
This meeting of the worlds. And it was interesting, man, because there was some pretty funny email conversation.
Yeah, I bet. So I want to dive a little bit more into the product. I've tried it because it was handed out at Summit at Sea, where I actually met Liana, your sister. And I've tried it. It's my kind of go-to.
The Hobbit.
Yeah, go-to bounce back product. What's in it that makes it so powerful? I mean, you keep saying whole foods. You keep saying that this product has kind of, I like how Tim says, like, it's my cover all my bases, in case I miss something nutritionally kind of supplement. What the hell's in it? Why does it work so well?
Just to cover off, actually, I didn't answer the second part of your question last time, is I think if someone were to read 10 hours a week on a given topic, and at the end of a year, they know more than nearly everyone. At the end of 2 years, they know vastly more than nearly everyone. At the end of 3 to 5 years, they will be legitimately one of the absolute world experts in that field. So in terms of and it's just something I got down that path, and then my readings actually dropped off dramatically on the dietary side of things as I focused more on being a boss. But I'm still pretty happy with myself. I don't get 4 to 5 hours of listening and education as it relates to health and fitness at a minimum per week, and typically considerably more. But what makes Athletic Greens tick, I think, is we have so much stuff in there, and we would be able to replace as a best practice multivitamin, best practice multimineral, a best practice sort of liver detox formula. We address chronic fatigue of your chronic adrenal fatigue, at least to some degree. We focus on making sure that the cofactors and the other elements that are required by the body to absorb nutrients are present. We look heavily at antioxidants, but not overboard on those. We do them only through herbal extracts primarily. And then we have all the gut elements of having prebiotics and probiotics there. So I think between those and the nearly 8 grams of straight superfood sort of dried goodness that we get on top of that, because we're a big fat 12-gram serve. There's no one that comes close to us from a straight dietary. Someone who haven't thrown in like a big scoop of cheap powder or something to try to flesh it out. That comes close. And I think literally it's that shotgun approach, man. You maybe like the woman the other day who told me she was sleeping without trembling legs at night for the first time in 4 years, and without 3 or 4 ibuprofen, which is a really bad idea, 6 days after taking a product. And I know for a fact that there's 99% likely magnesium deficiency on her case. But like we have a nice chunk of the best, most bioavailable form of magnesium in there. But it might not have just been that. Maybe
is that bisglycinate?
It's in glycinate, yeah. I like glycinate for that. I think most of the other forms, man, if you start to take them regularly, their nickname for, say, magnesium citrate is consteria, right? So you just got to be careful, because we are something that people take every day, and we are something that many people take more than once a day. And that does impact, there's a big difference. I weigh, 90 kilos. I'm very active. There's a big difference between myself and, say, someone's grandmother who weighs 48 kilos and is barely active in terms of what their daily nutritional requirements are. So we wanted to try to cross both those populations, but leave scope for someone to take more if they so desired, without, you'd have to really go through an absolute staggering amount to hit toxicity and on any ingredient, and you just wouldn't. You'd get diarrhea first. I'm just being honest.
Right.
I mean, you could go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 servings in a day, and you wouldn't get toxic on any of those. So I think that the key element is understanding that our bodies are incredibly complex, and our cellular machinery is the cornerstone of it all. And if you can get those cells working better, either because you've just helped your liver detoxify, or maybe because you've finally presented in an absorbable manner sufficient sort of B vitamins for your mitochondria to work so it can just tick along better. It doesn't really matter where the magic's coming from. I would argue that if someone eats really well, and considers intelligent supplementation, that over a period of time, just through the tissue regeneration and how our body creates new cells, etc., whether you have some significant deficiencies, such as the lady with the trembling legs who like literally felt better in 4 or 5 days, or you simply go through this process of creating a better body, because we are what we eat, and you might hear as well, you are what your food eats, but inherently we turn tissues over, Jonathan. So it can take a while. So we have kind of two camps of people. There are those like the lady from the email the other day, and then there are others who might take us for 3 or 4 months and then say, I don't feel any crazy difference in energy or anything, but I don't get the colds that everyone else does when we go flying. And if I stop taking it, I start to get those colds again.
Wow.
It's literally an insurance policy. And I don't want to rave on about a product because I'm really very heavily in the camp that food is first and there's no magic bullet. Yeah, there's no magic bullet. I wanted to ask
you about that. I mean, why supplementation if you're going to eat, a paleo diet, you're going to really invest in your health and nutrition? Why is supplementation as a whole important?
I think, man, the correct supplementation is the right idea. And I would argue that there are very few of us who live and have lived our entire lives, which is also the other important part, in a manner that is cognizant with our genetic makeup and how we sort of have evolved. We've kind of jumped ahead pretty quickly in the last 10, 20,000 years, and we pay for it with a whole host of things. Just being sitting around all day, I think, is a killer. So I think unless someone's really doing everything right, most people would be wise, and you should try to do everything right with some, and accept that, humans are humans and socializing, and fun is fun and everything else, and go knock yourself out with all that. But I think most of the time, most people should be trying to give their body the best fuel that they can. I personally found that in actual fact, you can be doing that to a pretty solid degree, but modern lifestyle and stresses of the modern lifestyle and just a changed food supply over time, I think, is the reason why we've had the success we've had, because I think there are very few people who don't do better when they just kind of top up the little bases. And the problem with that approach in the past is people were topping up the bases with isolated synthetic ingredients presented in a format that we aren't really designed to ingest. And it didn't make any sense to me to say eat like a natural whole foods based diet and have your food come healthy, but then top up with something that's very synthetic and artificial. And I mean, there's nothing inherently wrong with taking vitamins. And I think the format that they're presented needs to be done in a way that actually makes sense based on eat healthy.
Right. Now, what's the big deal with spirulina? Because, anyone who's consumed your product, the first thing they notice is it is athletic greens, hence the name. It's very green. And I assume that comes from the spirulina. What's the big deal with spirulina?
It comes from a couple of the greens, man. That deep dark green is one of our little secrets, and that we source our ingredients from the best places we can find them all over the world. The product is blended and manufactured in New Zealand, but some of those key ingredients are from New Zealand, and luckily for me, so am I. So I kind of have controlled the supply, and that's where we get that deep, deep green. Spirulina is basically, it's called a superfood, which is a term now bandied very regularly around. And really, if you just consider something that had nothing but goodness in it, and a lot of goodness, a lot of micronutrients. So many people forget the importance of micronutrients. And those are the vitamins and minerals that people just don't realize that literally are involved in nearly every single chemical process, the billions of processes that are happening every second in your body that require these micronutrients to function properly. So spirulina is just nature's way of delivering you a whole lot of that in a concentrated format, and it's also surprisingly high protein. So I think it's one of the superfoods that we have in there. It happens to be one that I very much like. And do I think you should run off and start eating like 5 grams of spirulina or growing it in your backyard? Like, that's up to you. But I do think as an adjunct to a regular diet, it's one of the foods that I think is very, very potent in terms of what it delivers per gram.
Awesome. So essentially just very rich in micronutrients.
Yeah, it's great. Full of micronutrients, full of chlorophyll. Like, it's just a lot of health in a very small, to get down to that, a couple of grams, it's been dried and carefully cold processed. So we keep, the chemical structure intact. There's no point cooking it. It can change things over time. So it's just nature's concentrated goodness. It arrives in all sorts of shapes and sizes. And I think variety is huge. The ancestral humans ate 200 to 400 species, and in every calendar year. And yet now, if you consider how many different animal and vegetable species do you really eat in a year? And that's where I think herbs and spices and superfoods and other things can become so important, because they give us that variety. There are differences in these chemical structures depending on where the plant's from and what sort of plant it is. So
now, Chris, I noticed on your blog that you've written quite a bit about vitamin D and vitamin K, and I have to admit that's kind of a gap in my knowledge. So I was wondering if you could kind of elaborate for us. Why are those vitamins important, and why is it that we might be missing some of them? I mean, I know vitamin D, because we're not in the sun as much as we used to be, but vitamin K I don't really know so much about.
I will say immediately, the number one format to get both your vitamin D and one of the top 3 or 4 things you could possibly do in the world for health, irrespective of vitamin D, is to make sure you get adequate sun exposure on your skin and natural light exposure to those eyeballs. And there's some very interesting studies coming out now on health impacts of sun exposure that are not related to vitamin D. But vitamin D is technically it's called a vitamin, is really a pre or pro hormone. It's utilized in nearly every single cell in our body. Oh, wow. And to be deficient in vitamin D is to be correlated, and obviously correlations aren't causation, but to be correlated with an increased risk of well over 200 diseases now, including 16 or 20 cancers, including melanoma, which is one that surprises many people who probably don't realize that indoor office workers get melanoma more often than outdoor, like farm workers do.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
There are other types of skin cancer, right? The outdoor worker gets more moles and freckles, but less melanoma. The indoor worker gets more melanoma. Yeah. But anyway, man, vitamin D, you need it for nearly every function in your body. We have receptors for it, at least, on nearly every cell in the body. It's gained a lot of popularity for its immune boosting effects in recent years. That people have realized that, that helps stop you from sort of succumbing to the flu or whatever else that's getting passed around. And it's also received a huge amount of sort of research and interest from its effects to sort of essentially pull calcium in the right direction. So the way, and this is the part that sort of changed in the last couple of years, is the understanding that you need, what's the right analogy? I always get this confused. One's a traffic light, the other one's the crowd control. But inherently, your vitamin D is telling your body to start to push calcium in certain places. You need the K2, which is a vitamin that's present in mainly fermented vegetables, but in a host of different vegetables, and different from the K1 that's in, say, green leafy vegetables. It's frequently sort of found and sold. Those two work synergistically as it relates to particularly the calcium usage. And what you don't want to have is a whole host of calcium cruising around your bloodstream in excessive levels. And you want to make sure that it's being directed not into plaque formation in your arteries, which is what can happen,
right,
but into bone formation. And what they've found is that there's no real danger to supplementing D3 by itself, but the two together just seem to amplify particularly the calcium sequestering and bone health, and therefore with the calcium sequestering, the heart health elements of each other. So again, man, nature just works in synergy almost the whole time. And those two together, I only recommend to my parents that they take 3 supplements. They're one, my dad sent me to, my mum's 66. And the athletic greens every morning, bring that up if you start to feel a little bit crook. Omega-3 and the D3 and K2. And if they're getting sun, they have a very low dose D3 and K2. If it's been a good chunk of time without any sun, and they're in New Zealand, it's starting to trend into winter now, then bring up the D3 and K2. Those two together are very synergistic.
Yeah, awesome. I was actually going to ask you, because my mother's recently been, as many, people in their 60s, diagnosed with osteoporosis. And so I was going to ask you, that becomes so much more important. And I was also going to ask you, what else do you recommend people to supplement on top of the athletic greens? So 2 or 3 questions answered with one stone there.
Well, mate, that's how I'd run it. And I think in the West, many people pound the milk and they might even take like a big tablespoon of calcium. It's a lot less important than not eating a pro-inflammatory diet and exercising regularly, ideally outdoors, and making sure that what calcium you do have is being directed in the right direction. So if your mother's been diagnosed with osteoporosis, I'd start her on a paleo elimination diet, then she can add in the foods that she tolerates well. And I'd get her moving as much as possible, and ideally loaded, man.
I love it because that's exactly what we've been doing over the last 4 months. So this kind of gives me a vindication, if you will, of the steps that I've been kind of guiding her through. Chris, I wanted to ask you, actually, though I did meet your sister at Summit Sea, I actually read about you in the 4 Hour Body. As you mentioned, Tim's a big fan of your product. How did that come to be? How did you get the product in front of him? And what resources, education? I mean, I know he looks to you as an expert. So tell our audience a little bit about what it is he refers to you for and why it was that you were written up in this book.
Okay, well, I have tried very hard to keep my personal relationship with Timothy Ferris, who's one of the guys I respect most on the planet.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, from our professional setup. And I met Tim when I was traveling in Buenos Aires in early 2006. I'd gone to play rugby for a little while and learn Spanish.
Oh, how funny.
I was sitting in a cafe having a Spanish lesson, and I see this white guy walk in. And he's just so obviously not from Buenos Aires. And so when my teacher got up to go to the bathroom, I just wandered over and introduced myself. And I think one of the coolest things about traveling, particularly for a long-term overseas, is you just become very good at just approaching people and making friends. And they don't have to be from any similar culture. Most of the world is very friendly when they're away from their local favorite nightclub. And we just hit it off and became really good buddies. And it was interesting, actually, because we agreed to go meet for breakfast the next day. And he said, just give me a bell in the morning. And he is he's different now, but back then he was an extreme night out. He would do all of his writing sort of 11 p.m. onwards.
Right.
And he just started work on this little book. But I remember at the time, and I was training really hard. And so I said I'd wait for this guy for breakfast. So I started calling him at about 9:45, 10, messaging him. It gets to like 1 p.m. and my last one's like, dude, I'm just going to go eat. I'm dying. And he's like, I'm sorry, man. I'll meet you in like 20 minutes. So I just slept in. And we went and sat down and discussed our various adventures in life up to that point. And he had mentioned the book then. He mentioned Brain Quicken.
Right.
And I was friends at the time with the New Zealand distributor Brain Quicken. So I pulled out of my bag. He said, you would never would have heard of it. It's a small brand. I said, oh, you mean this stuff? And Tim literally fell out of his chair. It was pretty funny. I had a bottle of Tim's product in Buenos Aires. So anyway, man, we became good friends, and he knows about obviously my educational background. Also, like him, I have a very strong reading interest in health and fitness and athletic performance. And he's seen what I've done to particularly the girlfriends I've dated in the 9 years that we're 10 years now that we've known each other. And, he knows that I had a lot of experience training girls. And he also knows that I read a lot. So it's just the interest element from Athletic Greens was me saying, hey, man, try this and tell me what you think. And when we got towards the end of December, it was probably maybe October in 2010, we sort of soft launched. I'd named it Athletic Greens because I'm an athletic guy and it's kind of greens based. And I regret those two decisions profoundly from a marketing standpoint. I dropped him a line and said, hey, man, I've decided that I have to change the name of this product because it pigeonholes us against these Muppets that just put dried grass in there and they're like $20 and we're like $100. It's just never going to work. And he said, no, don't change the name. I put you in the 4 Hour Body and it's gone to print. And that was the first I knew of it. And
wow.
And it was a huge lift for us. I don't think we drove a huge number of orders from the 4 Hour Body, but the credibility element of having appeared in Tim's book was very huge for us, particularly when we went looking for people who may be interested in sharing their love of us with their audience. So
wow.
We've been mates for a long time. I will ask him questions, random questions. He's way ahead of me in certain areas. I read more than him on other areas. And both of us have a network now of health and fitness kind of weirdos that we know. So typically most of our conversations now are, how's dating life, how's training, how's health, how's the biz, and then it'll be some completely random, sorry if I'm allowed to swear, completely random question out there about some element of health or performance or hormones or this or that. And between the two of us, we typically know someone who can give a pretty strong answer.
Yeah, I bet. Incredible. I'd love to be a fly on the wall of one of those conversations because you guys are two people that I very much look up to in the health space and obviously who know just about everyone worth knowing in the space. I think that's an incredible testament to just the power of serendipity in a random cafe in Buenos Aires.
He's gone on to do amazing things. And there's been no financial transaction ever until last year where we started paying for advertising on his podcast on occasion.
I didn't realize you guys were sponsoring the show.
Oh, we didn't a huge number, but we sponsored a bunch. Tim actually reached out to us and said, "Do you have an interest in sponsoring the show? Because I've got a couple other supplement companies, and this is the one I'd like to stand behind." So I said yes for sure, and it actually ended up being again an outstanding decision because of how it's driven the credibility with other people of influence. So your regular punter doesn't really know who Timothy Ferriss is. Your average entrepreneur absolutely does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Like we reach out to these other businesses to talk business, and they say, "Oh yeah, I love your product, man. I started taking it, years ago, and then I hear about it now on that Tim Ferriss podcast." And Ferriss, man, Ferriss is unbelievably smart and unbelievably driven, and when he gets dialed in, is unbelievably focused in terms of how he drives his own productivity. And look at what he's done. He's had a great little business that drove the lifestyle he wants. He's written 3 best-selling nonfiction books in 3 different genres, which not many people have done, maybe very 1 or 2 ever. And now he's driven his podcast to, he's going up into the heights. And I think he's really set his sights very, very high there, and he'll get it. So
right. I think he has one of the top podcasts on the planet, which is funny because he actually makes most of his money in startup investing. So I think just an incredible, incredible guy. And if anyone in the audience hasn't heard of him, I'm not sure what rock they're living under.
Yes.
Chris, tell me a little bit about your motto. I thought that was really interesting. 100% focus on happiness. What does that mean to you?
Sure, man. Well, basically, when I was originally launching Athletic Greens, I had been involved in some other business ventures that had gone heavily south and dragged me down with it. I had gone through bankruptcy. I'd had my name trashed through some litigation. I'd been unable to defend myself. I'd been really fighting for personal solvency at the same time as I'd raised a huge amount of money trying to launch and get through the R&D and get ready to go a greens product. And I actually had at the time a couple of other sort of business opportunities presented to me in the dietary supplement space. And I went, and I'd been trying very hard to get off the ground and start selling Athletic Greens, and I'd been failing miserably, mainly because I went into it with this idea in my head that I was great at selling face-to-face, therefore I'd be great at selling online because surely it was all the same. And I ultimately, in the middle of all that, started dealing with significant amounts of depression and didn't really want to face it. And I remember sitting down with my sisters who had gone to meet briefly in London at the time, and them sitting me down and saying, "Look, other people wouldn't notice this about you, but you're not the same guy, you're not the same brother, you're very different, you're very withdrawn. We think you're dealing with depression." I knew I'd been facing this, man, and I won't lie, at that time I was drinking more on the weekends than I should have. I wasn't in a happy place, and I was very miserable in a whole host of areas. And I said, okay, I'll go speak to a doc. I went and spoke to a doc I knew very well, great, respected mental health doc, and she just said, "Oh yeah, you've got all the symptoms. What do you want?" I think she thought I was turning up for a prescription. I just said, no. I think I'm going to go have a look at this from the other side, and not just a chemical side. So I began to have this focus on my own happiness. I started reading all these books on what drove happiness, particularly for entrepreneurs. I was very curious because I knew I was an entrepreneur, I wanted to stay in business, but realized I was sort of miserable in my own head. And as part of that evolution, I ditched the other product suites because they did not make me happy. I said to my then financial partner, "Look, I've been trying to do this for 10 months. I still believe that that's the way we need to do it in the format that I'd sort of decided on, but I'm miserable and one of us has to go." And he was a very gracious guy, a wealthy businessman from Sydney. And he said, "Look, man, I'll exit his effective investment on the condition that he converts that from equity into debt, and I personally guarantee the debt." So, which was very gracious of him. I also don't think he didn't want to be left trying to recoup the couple of $1 million by himself.
Oh, wow.
But we made that agreement, and then I sat there with no money, no nothing, and a focus on happiness. I just realized that if this is what's going to drive me, then I need to live it. And that led to dropping off the other brands, which were higher pain point, but I just wasn't in love with them, and focusing on Athletic Greens product, which I thought had the most power to do something in the world and was sort of the business venture I was most proud of, and have always, still now, is the business venture I'm most proud of. So it just became the catchphrase when I didn't initially want to be the voice or the personality behind the brand. And when I started writing emails to people from the company, I just signed off as 100% focused on happiness. I decided I'm just going to live this. And mate, it's just evolved to the point that it's on the label. It's on every email I send out to a couple 100,000 people on varying degrees of frequency. And yeah, man, it just sort of has become my motto. And I would like to say I've lived it very, very well, but I will have to say that in the last 2 or 3 years, I have let the balance of lifestyle equilibrium between health has been teetered in the favor of really focus on growing the business, not so much through stress, but for realizing that prolonged levels of low-level stress will affect your sleep. And if you don't sleep well, you're just in a spiral. And I've been in that spiral for about 2 years, and I had the hard landing in the last couple of months. So literally, man, it's sort of okay, great. Who cares about having a decent size business if your health isn't up to par? And again, man, I look the part from the outside, and I'll crush most people in the gym, but then I'll just start coughing afterwards.
Yeah, I noticed you've had a little bit of a cough throughout the interview. I think you and I are going to be fast friends. Sorry?
Why, have you had troubles with the same? Because the gut dysbiosis is messing with my system. And I mean, I'm not going to go in the whole medical history, but right now, my diet compliance is 100%, but my gut biome being completely out of whack is, plus the sleep component, like a hand in my ass. So like I said, if I took my shirt off on the beach now, you wouldn't know that, but that guy looks fit. It's like, nah, man, I don't feel superhuman. And normally I feel very much superhuman. But like I said, it was that 2-year no sleeping spiral. And even with the right diet and a bit of meditation, I get a massage a couple of times a week and plenty of time outdoors and the world's best dietary supplement, and I say that with no qualms at all, mate, the sleep is still enough to crush you.
Wow.
And I'm good friends with Doc Kirk Parsley.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a good buddy of mine. So it's interesting, man, because I did some blood tests with him 2 years ago, and he said, you need to fix this. Your fasted blood cortisol is 50% above the testing range. You need to sort your shit out. You're going to have a hard landing. And I was like, mate, I'm fine. And I wasn't. He was right, and I was wrong. So damn it, Kirk.
He's a rock star. He's also my go-to sleep expert. We've had him on the show, and just if there's something about sleep that he doesn't know, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, he's my personal doc. He's a very, very good guy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Chris, you mentioned some books. First, you mentioned books about nutrition and health and stuff like that, but you also mentioned some books on happiness. What are a few of the ones that have most impacted you?
I read The Business of Happiness and Delivering Happiness. So from the entrepreneurial angle, both of those I found quite interesting. Both for one he's just realized it makes him happier to be like, it's not so much the whole book, but both those guys just making relatively early in their career a recognition that they wanted, just growing a business wasn't enough for them. And they wanted to grow and be part of something that made them happy.
Yep.
Right. And it was the same for Tony Hsieh, and it was the same for Ted Leonsis. Right. And they're both billionaires, these guys. And I just thought it was very, very interesting to hear that perspective on business from these two guys. So those two are two of the first ones I read, and they stuck in my head most. There's all the self-help guys and everything else. Most of those guys get paid to be self-help guys. These were written by guys who the book was really just, it's just an artifact, man. It's because they wanted to write it. These guys are entrepreneurs first and self-help guys second, so I resonated better with them. I read a lot of biographies, and it was interesting, the billionaire biographies. T. Boone Pickens was a funny guy to read his biography. And just consider, these are guys who have gone through life, and there are some billionaires out there, I think, who are very happy, and there are some, I think, who are really not happy. And I have some friends in the medical world who are not Kirk, who do blood testing and blood work and other things for some of the billionaires, and their opinion is that most of them are not particularly happy. So I think that element of just focusing on the elements that make you happy are very important. And I think probably be best summed up, man, I'm going to butcher this guy's name because I always get it wrong. It's either Mark DeHourier. He's the founder of Paul Mitchell.
Jean-Paul DeJourier.
Jean-Paul Desjorier, yes.
Yeah.
And he's also obviously the founder of Patron. And he summed it up best. He goes, look, love what you do, love who you do it with, love who you do it for. And I'd probably put in that, like, I love how you do it, because I think a lot of guys can chase fast money and that can really bite them in the ass later. Yep. And then say, have fun while you do it. And I'm like, done. So
absolutely. It's funny you say that. And as I say, I think we'll be fast friends. After I sold my business in 2011, I happened to meet JP Desjorier and happened to hear his lecture. And it completely changed the course of my life for exactly that reason. I was like, man, what am I doing? Like chasing these business opportunities that make a lot of money, but don't make the world a better place and don't make me a better person. And, complete 180 into doing what I do now, which is just trying to help people be their best selves and learn and overcome their challenges in life. And I think in that sense, I identify with so much of what you said, and the focus on happiness and focus on spending your life doing things that you really love doing and that really bring you joy.
Absolutely. And he's an interesting guy. And typically they use him in the photos as Paul Mitchell, even though Paul Mitchell's passed away. But I just found that that entire approach to business was very refreshing to me. And in the last 6 months, we've had a lot of changes in terms of how I'm structured with some of the people I'm working with, what we're focused on in the business. And that in itself, making those changes was in itself stressful. But I'll take a compression of revenues for greater personal happiness. And literally in the last 2 months, man, where this little cough started, it's actually a result of a gastrointestinal candida overgrowth, which is relatively rare in guys.
It is, yeah.
I'm getting to the bottom of what happened there, and I basically think it was way too carb for too long in conjunction, which in itself isn't necessarily a bad thing, in conjunction with big sleep and stress problems, which combined led to essentially gut dysbiosis, an environment where the candida can start to creep a hold, and the candida actually really like ketones. Most bacteria do not. Obviously, candida are not actually bacteria. And, man, I just allowed them to flourish to the point that I'm at that systemic level. So,
wow.
It's pretty bad. And some of the viruses that I had, the Epstein-Barr-Coxsackie viruses that had crushed me, which are present in the entire population, like 96% worldwide.
Right.
You almost for sure as a traveler have these. And they're immune suppressing viruses that your immune system just keeps completely under control. And what happens is when our immune systems get a significant challenge, such as you go back in Nepal and you drink some dirty water and you get cholera, for 2 weeks, like, you are just in a bad way, and then you get better, and then that person in Western medicine is now suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome. And this is exactly what happened to my cousin who runs a foundation up in the Hindu Kush. And most doctors say you just need to wait a year and get it over and done with. They don't go the level of testing that I ended up going to in that clinic in the US, which literally said you have Coxsackie and Epstein-Barr like off the charts. And that's what's making your immune system depressed. And at the same time, but in my case, it hadn't come from being some harsh challenge. It came from the massive amount of damage I was doing to my GI tract by eating foods that I just didn't do well with. So I was tearing all these little holes in my GI tract, which so many people do and maybe don't realize it. That was sort of the immune kickoff that got the virus its head start. So I have that same, the Coxsackie and Epstein-Barr are back, and candida. And with the prolonged sleep, I have the free testosterone of like a 7-year-old guy at the moment. My top line testosterone is okay. And Kirk was right 2 years ago. And it's the interesting mix, man. Not enough sleep, carrying stress for too long. I need to take some more big breaks, and the eventual gut dysbiosis. And it's the gut dysbiosis that's causing all the big problems, but they're all tied together. So I think for entrepreneurs, you probably have, if you're a dynamic guy, my sister loved you, I think you and I are going to get on. Because I don't normally do these that often, but it's been great chatting to you. But it was largely because Leanna said, no, you got to talk to this guy. He's absolutely awesome. So,
well, that's awesome. I'm honored, and I was totally impressed by her as well. We completely hit it off. I have a question for you, Chris. I've been feeling a little bit low on the energy and motivation department myself. Part of it is, I haven't been sleeping enough, but I got my normal blood test, all that stuff, pretty normal. T is slightly low, nothing jumping out, and I think maybe a lot of people are in that position where they're like, look, doctor says I'm fine, but I don't feel good, but I have this little cough. What are the next steps? What do you do if, your blood work looks fine? How do you go about determining what's wrong?
Man, I do a full GI panel. I like the one by Genova, which was formerly had a random name like White Mountain or Great Plains or some shit like that, but they're now called Genova Labs. I like their gut panel. It's nowhere near as expensive as back in the day when I was trying to test for each of these individually with that clinic. I don't know what that would cost you depending on where you are in the world, but I'd try to find something like that. And I'd also have a look at what is happening. How are you eating? Is there some element? Have you ever done a paleo elimination diet? If you haven't, you should, because it's the only real gold standard, and it's a wake-up call to every single person I know who's done that. It has been a wake-up call, at least to some degree. Some of them listen to the wake-up call, some of them don't. And it really varies over who ends up with sort of what actually ends up being a problematic food or class of foods for you. Obviously the sleep, obviously the sun. And I'd be curious to see your bloods, man. I don't know how comprehensive that panel was, but a lot of guys say I got bloods and my testosterone. Did they measure free testosterone, which is the bioavailable testosterone? Did they measure serum testosterone? Did they look at your sex hormone, sex globulin binding hormone, SBGH, and SGBH? Because you can have, like your estradiol, like what were your estrogen levels like? And Kirk's like the king daddy of that hormonal profile. I think you need to do the elimination diet, the full panel of bloods and that GI panel at a minimum.
Wow.
And I think that I'd do the elimination diet regardless of anything else. So you don't have to wait for any bloods to start that. I'd just go do it.
Yeah.
Maybe on the other side of, I think you're going to something like Burning Man pretty soon. So maybe on the other side of that.
I try to stay paleo all the time, though. I mean, I don't even do the elimination diet. I just went full swing with it. We've had so many of the paleo guys on the show, Rob Wolf and Lauren Cordain, and I'm completely sold on the diet as a whole. But I didn't think to get the microbiome tested. I should do that again. It's been like a year.
Yeah, I'd do that, man. I mean, Rob Wolf's one of my favorite guys. He's one of the other guys I really, really respect out there.
Agreed.
And he's doing a lot of great work for the greater good without ever bothering to try to get accolades for it. So
absolutely,
he's a good boy. I haven't met him face to face. I've had a bunch of phone calls with him. But mate, I would do the GI tract. I'd even considered going autoimmune for a period. I don't know how old you are, but I'd try an autoimmune protocol and just see. Maybe, unfortunately, in my family, I think we have a problem with nightshades because I have found that I do. And eggplant was like my favorite vegetable for a long time, especially living in Japan for a bunch of years. They do some great things with eggplants and curry and all sorts of stuff. But no, man, I would try that. If you've already done paleo, then I'd go the autoimmune protocol for paleo, and then I'd do the gut biome. And if you've been extremely low carb for a while, I'd also consider I'd do the gut panel first, and then I'd consider a significant reintroduction of some carbohydrates timed right, depending on what your gut panel came back, and potentially doing something like I'm just currently experimenting with, which is pretty crazy levels of probiotics.
Love it. All right, I'm going to play with that. That gives me some good homework when I get back from the burn. We're running a little long here. You've been very generous with your time. I want to ask you, we'll link everyone up to Athletic Greens. We'll link them up to your website if they just visit the blog post. What is the major message that you want people to take away from this episode? What do you want them to learn from the time that they've spent with you today?
I'd say, like anything else, when you get to hear someone's experiences or anything else, like food is absolutely first. Don't assume that just because you've thought it's healthy your whole life that it's healthy for you, because that's the trap I got myself into. And realize that you can have your food dialed in across the board and nutrition dialed in across the board, but if you're not sort of looking after yourself from a more holistic level, and I'd put sleep and stress in the same boat there, then the entire thing can come screeching to a halt on a runway, with no landing gear. And I'm not like that bad. I just have a cough that won't go away, and I don't feel as awesome as I normally do, but I don't like it. So why get to this position? Because clawing out of this hole is a mission. And I think if people could take it away and say food is first, but it's not everything. The sleep and other elements are just as important.
Fantastic. That's a wonderful note to end on. Chris, it's been such a pleasure and such an honor chatting with you. It sounds like you and I will certainly be in touch. I look forward to chatting again next time.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. I hope your listeners got some value.
I'm sure they did. And the pleasure was absolutely all mine. Take care, Chris.
Cheers, mate.
All right, super friends, that's it for this week's episode. We hope you really enjoyed it and learn a ton of applicable stuff that can help you go out there and overcome the impossible. If so, please do us a favor and leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher or however you found this podcast. In addition to that, we are always looking for great guest posts on the blog or awesome guests right here on the podcast. So if you know somebody or you are somebody or you have thought of somebody who would be a great fit for the show or for our blog, please reach out to us either on Twitter or by email. Our email is info@becomingasuperhuman.com. Thanks so much.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.